Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Imperfect Show. This is our first episode of 2021, and we're excited to be back here with you. We've taken a little break over the last few months, but Jeremy and I are excited to get into this again and start making videos for you guys. Today we're going to talk about you might have seen on the Mighty Oaks YouTube channel, we've done a couple of videos with the men's program team and the women's program team, just reflecting on the past year and kind of what that looks like moving into this next year. And we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of that and for what that means to us personally, some of the challenges we faced, lessons learned, and what's that going to look like for us moving into this next year, what the dynamic has been for our family. So we kind of want to talk through some of that with you guys today. And so I think the first thing really that we were going to discuss was just some of the challenges we faced in 2020. I think a lot of people were really happy to turn the page and move into 2021, but we're barely like 2 weeks into it, and it seems to be just as challenging, if not more, as the year that we've just been through. So we just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the challenges that we had last year and kind of moving into this year, what that's looking like for us. So Jeremy, what would that be kind of for you?
Well, I think regardless of our position, what we believe about coronavirus and where it came from and what it all means and how it's been handled, or the election and maybe the connection between the two, regardless of how you feel about all of those things, one thing that is true for all of us is that those things are out of our control, but they impact us directly. So we have not had control over wherever you live, your elected leaders and others have done to deal with coronavirus, and some may be better, some may be worse, depending on where you live. The election and the outcome of the election, hopefully you did your part, but ultimately you had very little control over how that went down and even what we're living through right now. And I think one of the important lessons of this last year has been just that. And these are the conversations we've been having, and people are frustrated and they're angry and screaming about, we need to do more, we need to do this, we need to do that. And I think probably one of the biggest lessons is we must focus on what we can actually control, what we can actually impact, and not worry as much about the things that we can't. So much anxiety, so much fear, so much worry is because we're constantly struggling in our minds and in our hearts with things that we have no control over. So I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons of this year is this is life. This was life blown up. This was life exaggerated, but this is life. This is how it works. So that's one of the biggest lessons. This is what happens, but we control what we can control. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, a little bit more. But the flip side of that, not only was that one of the biggest lessons, I think that was one of the biggest challenges, is that so much of the last 11 or 12 months, 10 months have been out of our control. We just haven't had control. And so whether it's control over all of our schooling for our kids, control over where we go and what we do and how we do it and how we function and what's going to happen. We have so little control over those things that it creates very unique challenges. And whether you're a single person who has a job, a single young person living at home, you have a family with small kids, you have a family with older kids, it doesn't matter where you find yourself in life, you're an older person, wherever you find yourself in life, that has been probably the biggest challenge. I just don't have control.
And that really brings a lot of fear. If you're afraid of the unknown, and if you're afraid of that not being in control, that really brings a lot of that with it. And for me, that's kind of what it's been. It's just more fear of the unknown, because nothing is predictable anymore. And everything is, one day it's this way and you think it's going to be that way for a while, and then things change and you have to adjust. And that's something that I've always been very uncomfortable with, is last minute changes, being, having to adjust at the last minute, and things not being what you thought they were going to be. And that is something that I've really learned from this last year that has been a huge challenge. But I feel like that has really taught me to maybe learn to be a little bit more that way, and really
more
just
what way? Flexible,
to be more flexible, to be more not so afraid of the unknown, to be more willing to kind of accept that maybe things are not always going to be what I thought they were going to be, and that's okay. That doesn't mean my life is falling apart. That doesn't mean
Right.
that, I can't be okay in the midst of all of that. And I think that's something that I have, again, same as you, that's been a challenge, but that's also something that I've learned is just instead of being afraid of that, just kind of embracing it and just knowing that I'm going to be okay, no matter if things are predictable or not, or if I have to adjust, or, things are changing all the time. That's going to be okay.
Yeah, I think, our fear of the unknown, when we talk about fear of the unknown, in the Christian world, we talk about faith and the importance of faith. All those go back to that fear of the unknown. Faith is required because we can't control the future. Our fear of the unknown is because we can't control the future. And most of the time, we can control a lot of aspects of our life. So there may be fear of the unknown as in, what's the economy going to do? Or will I still have my job in a year or something? But I can control everything else. And many of those things have been taken away from us. And so, yeah, that's the other side of it. In the beginning, when it was 15 days to flatten the curve or whatever, it's like, well, we can deal with, 15 days. This is what it's going to look like. And then it extended, and it's been adjusting. We just don't know what the future is going to look like. And still, today, this second week of January, we don't know what the future is going to look like. And,
we don't know.
and so it's really resting in just being okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and really using our faith to help us be okay with
Right.
that. I think that's kind of what I've learned too. And in talking to a lot of other people, that kind of seems to be a common thing, a commonality, I think, amongst us,
Right.
is that we feel like we've had to really depend on our faith so much more to help us to be okay with this and to help us to not be afraid. And I'm not saying afraid like afraid.
Like scared.
It's just, right, not
Yeah.
scared. It's just that
It's unsure,
that kind of,
it's anxious.
Yeah. And so a lot of people have been dealing with that. And so just allowing your faith to kind of help you to be okay in that.
Right. That's good.
And so lessons learned, I feel like for both of us, challenges and lessons. But for our family, it's also allowed us to have some really interesting conversations with our kids. And as we have kind of walked them through this time, and we've said before, we have 2 adult kids, and then we have 2
Kind of adult kids.
Kind of, I guess.
Legally
'cause we still
adult
call them
kids.
kids. I don't know.
They're still living in our house and eating our food.
Our
But
oldest, they're 19 and 21, so they're still here. But for a lot of reasons.
part of it
But
is
I'm sure,
because of this last year.
Yes, if
They
you
couldn't
have,
go to college. They had to stay
Yeah.
home and do their classes.
if you have older kids, I'm sure a lot of you are having your kids at home with you again. So we have them, and then we also have 2 middle school age children. And so the conversations have been really interesting, obviously different with our adult children as it has been with our younger kids. But it's allowed us to have some really interesting conversations about faith, about not allowing our fear to dictate our circumstances and the way that we respond to them. And then also just about, the politics conversations have been interesting. But I feel like it's allowed us to have a really good opportunity to get to know our kids in a different way and to maybe have conversations that we otherwise probably wouldn't have really been able to have in the way that we have.
Right.
And to just prepare our kids for their futures and some things that they might be having to face because of what we're going through right now. And so I've really appreciated the conversations that we've been able to have with them during this time.
Yeah, I think it's been good. We've talked about this even in the last couple of days, but we say things like, and a lot of other people do that have kids, say things like, I don't want to leave this kind of a country. I don't want to leave this kind of a world. I don't want to leave this kind of a community for my kids. I wanted something better. And that's a real concern and a real wish and hope. You want something better for your kids. But on the other hand, when we talk about not being able to control the future, whether it's when we die or when they move away or 5 or 10 or 20 years after that, at some point, the world will be different. And we can't control that. As Christians, we need to rest in the fact that we believe God knew exactly when our kids would be alive, the things they'll be doing into their futures. And so instead of feeling bad about the world that they're living in or getting ready to move into as adults and then kids growing up, it's our responsibility, again, getting back to what we can control. It's our responsibility to use the moment we're in to equip them for whatever happens next. And that was a conversation that we had even just maybe a week ago. All right, things are different than we would like for them to be right now. And they'll probably be different than we would like for them to be again in the future at some point. maybe it's going to get worse from here. Maybe it will get better. We have no idea. But there are some things we can do, and there are some things that we can focus on. And we had a great conversation about what is that and what does that look like, and how do we move forward in that. And I think it's critical. That's what you have to do when you are in a moment like this one. That's what you can control.
And really for our older kids, it's been kind of neat to watch them because they have even some of the ways that they have decided to move forward in their lives. This situation has confirmed for them that they should continue in that way, or maybe it has caused them to step back and adjust. Maybe I need to move forward in a different direction, or maybe I need to kind of change some of the ways I'm doing things, or this thing that I'm studying. And so that's been kind of neat to watch too, is them looking at their futures, maybe even more than they normally would. And when I think about just the opportunity to be able to have this time with them, I think the same, instead of feeling bad. And there's a tendency to do that as parents, is to feel kind of bad that, wow, our kids are going to have to grow up. And then you think about like our grandkids, and they're going to have to grow up in a world
if we ever have grandkids.
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? But if we do, our grandkids are going to have to grow up in a world that's completely different, than our kids or us. And I think that's always the case, but even drastically more. I feel like if we ever have grandchildren, they're going to grow up in just a completely different world than we would maybe like for them. But instead of feeling bad about that, maybe feeling more empowered as a parent to press into that and to move forward in even more in the ways that, and take more teaching opportunities. And I think with our older kids, we've definitely seen them really thinking about that and maybe adjusting some things in their life so that their futures can look the way that they're supposed to in the world in which we are living in, or they're going to be living in right now. So it has been kind of neat just to have the conversations and really just to teach them to not really embrace the fear, but more embrace their faith and moving forward in that direction a little bit more than usual, I think.
It gives us a little more of an opportunity to have a serious conversation too, because you go through life and everyone's doing what they're doing, and if everything's just going along, talking about what is your number one priority, how do you prepare for the future, these aren't conversations that anyone wants to have, but right now we can have them. And again, we just had that conversation and said, in a time like this and any time in your life, your number one priority is always to give glory to God. That's it. That is your number one priority. It's not all the other stuff that you get to enjoy or whatever. It's that first. So whether things are really good or things are really bad, you can do that. That's number one. But in order to do that, you have to know what God wants you to do. So you need to spend time before the crisis comes, before the future arrives. You need to spend time reading the Bible and understanding the Bible so that you can navigate turbulent times in a way that will help you to do your number one thing, which is glorify God. Having that conversation, it begins there. You have to know the Bible. That's why you read the Bible every day. That's why you spend time in church and in these Bible conversations and learning, so that you know how to navigate the future going forward, regardless of what that is. And then you prepare spiritually. Are you right with God? Are you right with other people? Are you understanding what the Bible says so that you can navigate forward? Prepare physically, taking care of yourself so that, again, if you have to, it could be anything. It could be natural disasters. It could be political upheaval. It could be the stuff that we're dealing with now. Keep yourself in a place where you can adjust to what's happening physically. So spiritually, you need to do that physically. Financially is a big one. Keep yourself financially independent, financially free, so that if there is a downturn economically, if there is something else, you're not beholden to anyone to maintain your solvency financially. And then be prepared with the essentials of life, the things you would need in the short term. Having a conversation like that is so important, but it's one you could go your entire life without ever having. And a moment like this creates the opportunity to say that. No matter what happens, you glorify God. You do that when you know what He wants you to do. You prepare yourself spiritually. You prepare yourself physically. You prepare yourself financially. And if you do those things, then you're going to be just fine. It doesn't mean it will be easy, but you will be able to, again, go back and do the number one thing. And, without this, and I know a lot of people are in different places with this, I understand there's a diversity of struggle across the board, but we've had the opportunity to sit down and have those conversations.
And it's really giving me a lot of hope, really, for our kids as they're maybe thinking about these conversations, that they would remember, when they do get to move out on their own, and when they're old enough to do that, but then also when they're old enough to move on with their careers and do all those things, that they would remember who they're serving, that they would remember, some of the things that we're trying to teach them during this time. And so I really hope that that's been the case for a lot of parents. And, we've had conversations with people who have taken advantage of this time to have those conversations, but it's just really important, rather than just kind of hoping for it all to pass and hoping to get to the other side of it. And I think that's something we determined kind of early on in this thing, when we realized that it was going to be lasting for a while, that let's just take advantage of the opportunity that we have, however different it might be, but let's just have these conversations. Let's just prepare ourselves in a positive way to face what's coming.
Yeah, that's good. And again, as difficult as things have been for most Americans, I realize this is not all, but for most Americans, we are in a relatively safe moment. It's a crisis on the global scale. Even nationally, we're dealing with some things that could be considered crisis, but most people are safe in that they have physical safety, they have space to make these decisions and have these conversations. If a natural disaster comes into your life, which it might, you may not have the same space or the same safety. So dealing with these things right now really can be a blessing. And if not for you, then for those that you have the opportunity to influence.
One of the things I really have appreciated also is just watching how the church has kind of adjusted as well. We attend a church not too far from here, I guess.
Not too far.
Depending on how you consider that.
It's all relative.
It's about, And so, and just watching how our church personally has adjusted to this time, and doing online services for a while, and then meeting outside, and just the way that the church has adjusted to be able to minister to a large group of people, and just the way that we have been able to do that as a church, and then just watching churches nationwide, adjusting in that way, has been such a blessing to our family. And then also, to some people this might not be that important, but to us it is very important. The gyms that we're a part of, just watching how people like that have adjusted to be able to again reach a lot of people. And my gym was doing Zoom classes for a while, and I know just getting back into that was such a help for me personally, but we talked about kind of being physically ready. And so those are a couple of things that for me have really been an encouragement and a blessing, just to watch how people have adjusted just kind of during this time, just to be a help to other people.
One of the big lessons, and I wrote about this in a blog earlier last year, was people who can adjust are going to make it. People who can't adjust, either because they are physically unable, financially unable, or just intellectually, it's too difficult. People who are unable to adjust are not going to make it if things change. I've said this many times. Success in any area of life is directly connected to how well you handle change, how well you adjust to the situations around you. And that's what we've seen. I mean, again and again and again, businesses that have said, all right, well, we're going to do it this way now because we have to. We know several business owners. We have small business owners in our family that they've done some crazy stuff to make it work, but they've made it work. And as you mentioned, the gyms and churches and people who have said, this is not how we would like for this to be, but not doing anything is just not an option. So we're going to make it happen, and really appreciate the spirit in that and seeing people do that. I know a lot of people have been really upset at their fellow Americans this year. And, a lot of that's warranted, I guess. And, I don't know. But at least in my world, a lot of people have just said, we're going to do what we need to do, and we're going to do it well. And it may be different, but we're going to make it. And it's been great to see and encouraging.
It has been very encouraging. Yeah. And, just to, again, going back to, the family and kids, being able to watch that and being able to watch other people doing that and living in that way. Yeah. And I know that, like we said, we know some some small business owners ourselves. And one of the reasons they're doing that is because their kids are watching them and they're trying to teach their kids to be resilient during a time like this as well. But just for, I have appreciated that.
Yeah.
It's been an encouragement just to be able to have that as an example to our kids of, this doesn't have to get you down. This doesn't have to, there's ways that you can adjust, and to being able to adjust to change, I think has been a huge encouragement just to watch.
That's been a huge lesson. Huge lesson. There's a great book called Anti-Fragile. It's a little bit deep. It's not one of those weekend reads. A lot of statistics and a lot of history, but the premise of the book, or the point of the book, is people who are diversified, people who can adjust, people who aren't tied to one particular way. They're anti-fragile. They're not fragile. They're not breakable. They can adjust and they can continue to move forward. And watching that play out this year, I read that book last year, 2019, and going through 2020. I mean, I must have thought of that book 500 times, watching people who are like, they're anti-fragile. They can do it. They've decided to do something else. They've retooled what they do to adjust to a changing market. I don't like masks. I wear one as little as I possibly can. But people who have said, I used to make this thing, but there's a market for masks. So they've done that. That's not politics. That's business. And they figured out how to make that work. So many other examples of that we could give. But it's been really encouraging to see that.
You mentioned the book Anti-Fragile, and I know you've mentioned it a lot.
Yeah, because I think about it a lot. Yeah,
and it's been good for us to have the conversations, based off of that and just what that means and what that can mean for us and our family. But what would you say are some maybe resources that have been a help to you as we kind of came through last year? We talked about church, and we talked about kind of small businesses, gyms, kind of adjusting to help people. One of my goals for this year, and if you would watch our very first episode last year, we talked about resolutions. I don't like to make New Year's resolutions. I say goals. So one of my goals for this year is to read at least one book a month. And I think it probably would be more like two, but my goal is to do one a month. And so one of the books I'm reading right now, I'm really, really enjoying, but Jeremy's a reader. So you talked about Anti-Fragile that you did in 2019. What are some maybe resources that you kind of helped you through 2020 that you're looking forward to this year as well?
I'll tell you, I probably read less this year, fewer books this year than I have at any time in my adult life. One of the lessons there is you need to prepare before you have to do something. So many of the books that I've read, so many of the things that I've studied over the last 20 years really helped my perspective this last year. But had I tried to figure it all out in the middle of it, it would have been too much. One of the reasons I read less this year is because reading a leadership book or reading, a lot of other things in the middle of something that is so upside down and makes so little sense, those things are always affixed to life and culture moving the way that we anticipate for it to move. We can see the curve. We know it's going that direction. And since we know it's going like that, here's how you need to operate, to function in that world. Well, the world has been upside down. And so I have read a few books this year, of course, not as much as I have in the past, but probably resource-wise, the things that have helped me the most are conversations with our family. Church has been huge. Really just surrounding ourselves with the right people to be able to process these things with. And I have a lot of very political friends, people who have very strong political opinions, but the people who are closest to me, although they may have strong opinions, they also have the ability to talk through what's happening. And so they may arrive at a more right position than someone else would, but having the ability just to deconstruct and talk about it, try to figure it out and ask questions, what do we do next? That's been just an incredible resource. And knowing there are people that I could pick up the phone and talk to. And again, these are not people you put into your life when you need them. They're people that you build relationships with prior to that. Church has been a huge one this year. We've done small groups for our church and taught Sunday school, for many, many years. This was the first time we had a home group, was this year, which was, and our group came to our house, and that's been a huge resource as well, and encouraging. And again, staying connected to people. You're not alone, but you can feel alone, particularly when everyone's telling you to isolate. You stay connected to people, and you continue to do what you need to do. And then you mentioned the gyms and other things. You can't isolate yourself. And we've been thankfully in a community of people who have been unwilling to isolate. And that's been probably the number one resource. Now, I would say the Bible, because the Bible is and has been, that has to be the number one resource. It guides us forward. It helps us know how to think and how to operate. But just those connections have been the other thing.
Yeah, I think for me too, that's been kind of maybe getting more basic in the things that I am listening to and reading and all of that. Last year was kind of like that for me as well. I think I don't know if I can admit this, but I'm kind of putting myself out there. I probably read my Bible more in 2020 than I have in a really, really long time. Just being more consistent. I think part of that has to do with just having more time at home to be able to do that. But I feel like I have been more consistent with that, but maybe clung more to the truths in it without adding other things than I have in a really long time. And so just going back to the basic truths of life and the basic things that I want to follow and the way that I want to be. And if anything, last year kind of caused that in my life as well, just to be more in tune with the kind of person that God wants me to be. And that has helped me to be able to process, I think, a little bit better kind of the things that we've been going through and the way society is right now, and just all that we've been through as a country, as the world. And that's really helped me a lot. It's just to be more basic. Like what you said, not trying to be reading all different kinds of books and all of this, which there's nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, it's been better just to focus more on the basic things and really just reading my Bible a lot more.
One of the most, prolific, if that's the right word, readers that I personally know as a friend, Bill Coate, Bill and Julie. And Bill reads about one book a week. That's just, he's brilliant, and that's what he does, and he's always done that for years and years and years. I asked him this question a couple weeks ago, and he said, this year I've not read one book other than the Bible, which is, again, for him, that's crazy. Yeah. And he reads his Bible every day anyhow. But he said, I've read more of the Bible this year than any time in my life, and he's been a Christian for decades. But I think that's it. It's getting back to technique is really helpful and really important at the right time. Yeah. But sometimes you just have to pull back and get grounded again, and that's a great place to be.
Yeah. Well, that makes me feel better. If Bill did that, then that's okay.
He's probably reading his Bible once a week now, but like the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, that makes me feel a little better. But yeah, it's so true that it has really helped to be more. And I've talked to a lot of people who they kind of did the same in their families with the things that they've been involved in. Just kind of go down to the basics, the bare minimum of what we are doing, and just focusing more on who we are and the life that we should be living and our family. And I feel like a lot of people have done that.
That's right. Yeah, it's good.
I feel like people especially right now that we've transitioned to 2021, and it's still kind of looking like there's not a lot of changes. A lot of people were looking forward to this year, and
January 1st, it was all going to change.
It was all going to change, and
it got worse.
Has not changed for the better. So I think a lot of people right now are maybe a little bit discouraged. They're looking for a little bit of hope, and we're not maybe feeling like we're seeing it anywhere. But what would you say, maybe how would you communicate hope to someone right now when that's something that so many people are struggling with, and they're not finding that hope in 2021 that they were hoping for, and that they were looking towards? What would you say to people that are kind of feeling like that right now?
Right. Well, I'd say go watch the Mighty Oaks show, where I asked this question of 5 of our guys. I think you asked the ladies too. Yes. So the last 2 episodes of the Mighty Oaks show, also on the Mighty Oaks channel of YouTube, you can find those there. And I would encourage you to watch those. A lot of the same questions we asked of other people, some great insight there. But people struggle with hope when they're looking for hope in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for hope in a politician or politicians or a party, they're going to let you down. The very best of politicians that align the most closely with what you believe, they're going to let you down at some point. They're human, they're fallible. We like to say politicians are evil right now. We're really into that, everybody's evil thing. There are evil people. A lot of them, I'm sure, are. I think a lot of them are just confused humans just like you and me. But regardless, if your hope is in politicians or in a party or in what you thought to be true of that system, you're going to run out of hope because things are not going to go the way that you want them to. It doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you're on. If your hope is in finances, those are going to change. If your hope is in your job, so many people have learned this year, that's much more fragile than many people thought it was. We could look at all of these things. If your hope is not in something or someone who is eternal, who has always been and always will be, then you will be let down. Eventually, that hope will be found to be not worth anything. Faith is only as good as the object of your faith, what you're putting your faith in. We would say what you're putting your hope in, your confidence. And so hope comes from looking to a God who's bigger than this moment, bigger than this situation, who pre-exists time, who will last forever, who has a plan that's bigger than anything we can understand, and having confidence that he's going to take us where he wants us to be. Hope is that. And on the other side of it then, peace comes when we put our hope in him and then do the work that we can do, control what we can control. And if we'll put those things together, regardless of what's happening in our world, even if we don't like it, you don't have to like it, you don't have to be happy about it, but you can have peace and hope, because this is not all there is. Mm-hmm. It's much, much bigger than this. And we have to be eternally minded. We have to look beyond just the couple of years that we have here on this earth.
And that's something that I've really had to remind myself a lot of in the midst of all of this, is it can be so easy to put your hope in someone or something changing. And when changing rather than the situation getting better is kind of what I mean by that, is it can be so easy to put your hope in that. And so I found myself asking myself that a lot last year, is if I'm acting like this, or if I'm thinking this, then what does that mean? Where am I actually, like, what am I putting my hope in?
Yeah.
Or who am I putting my hope in?
Who am I putting my hope in?
And just reminding myself that it cannot be in something that is going to be changing. It cannot be in, politics. It can't be in a person. It can't be in, the situation getting better. It can't be the situation maybe being what I want it to be. It has to be in God, in someone that never changes.
That's right.
And I have found myself becoming hopeless for our kids, for our family, for our situation, when my focus shifts from that.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that has brought me hope. And I would say the same. That's what I would tell someone as well, is you will be unhappy and you will feel hopeless unless you put your hope and your faith in someone that's not changing, and that's God. Yeah,
I've used this illustration over and over again, and I always do when we talk about hope. I think I've used it on this show before. But I think we become hopeless when all we can see is the circle that we're standing in. Mm. There's a circle around all of us. That is our world, not the globe, but our world. That includes all the people that we know, the job that we have, our hopes, our dreams, our ambitions, our fears, all of it's in that circle. Hopelessness is when all you can see is that, and you don't believe there's anything outside of that circle. We have hope when we stop looking inside of the circle and look outside of the circle to one who is transcendent. That word transcendent means beyond time and space. Transcendent God. He's outside of our world. He's not moved by anything that's happening. He could care less about so many of the things we're overwhelmed with right now, because he's bigger than all of it, because he is over all of it, and because it's just a blip on the screen to him. And hopelessness is looking inside of your circle, saying there is nothing else. Hopefulness, being full of hope, is knowing there's a God that's bigger than this world that I live in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he does care, and he does love, and all of that. Yeah. But for him,
he cares about how these things impact us,
yes,
and how we respond to them. Mm-hmm. But he's not moved by them, I guess is what I meant. Yeah, he's not. What's happening in the world does not emotionally move God in the same sense that it does us.
Yep.
He says he loves us. I mean, the Bible says Jesus wept, Jesus cried. He can be moved emotionally, but it's not knocking him down. He's not looking around going, what do I do now? Mm-hmm. It's okay. He's got it.
It's not going to cause him to be someone else, or to do something else,
right.
or to change, what he's been setting out to do. And I think that's so true, and that's really important to remember
Yes.
that our hope can be in so much more than kind of what we perceive
Yeah,
things to be.
that's right.
We hope that just some of those thoughts have been an encouragement. We wanted to share kind of our experiences with you guys of just some of the things that we've been processing last year and this year, and we just hope that maybe some of it has been a help to you, and we're looking forward to getting back into more episodes of the Imperfect Show.
Yeah, if you have some ideas going forward this year, we have a slate of things that we want to talk about and get to, and we will. But if you have something that you'd like for us to talk about or deal with, a question, a comment, some insight, share that with us in the comment section there. And we would love to either communicate with you directly or do a show about it. And really, the whole purpose of this show is for us to just not even give you some insight, just talk about our own experience and share some things that we're dealing with and going through. And by way of that, Lord willing, be an encouragement to you. So appreciate it. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.